I'm Elise Svensk, and this week I'm joined by Chris, an OT who has been building his own private practice in home mods and assistive tech since going out by himself in 2023. Today we're talking about what it really takes to grow a small practice, navigating a tough recruitment market, and stepping into leadership for the very first time. Now let's get started. Welcome, Chris. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
How exciting. So first person off the bat for season 6 of OT Coaching Confidential. How exciting. Chris was just saying he's only listened to a couple of these, so he's in for a surprise as to how this is going to run. So tell us a bit about you, Chris. Who are you? What's going on for you at the moment?
Okay, well, I'm running a very small OT business. Been out on my own since 2023 full time, and before that was sort of just dabbling in it and sort of working in a full time and then part time role while doing this on the side out of hours, and then sort of transitioned in 2023 and been doing that since then. Things have been, I guess, growing very, very slowly and to a point where I'm at now, I guess, but I suppose we'll go into more detail about that,
Absolutely.
as this conversation goes on. Yeah.
Definitely. Tell me a bit about how you became the OT that you are today. So when did you graduate? What's your sort of training years look like? What's that look like? Because I think that's always interesting when we're thinking about, especially when we're trying to grow our business and bring on additional staff, to know where our strengths lie and what our background is.
Okay. So I graduated in 2016 and had quite a few job changes since then, purely because I didn't really know what area of OT I wanted to go into. And that varied from a couple of sort of residential aged care facility roles, did some OC rehab, and then finally I went into the sort of the community OT role, which is where I sort of, I guess, found my area that I wanted to work in. That was in a sort of public health organisation. And then while I did that, I also took on a casual role for a private NDIS company in the same sort of role, except just NDIS. And so things just sort of went from there. I did a lot of work in the sort of the physical disability space, in the aged care space, where physical impairments are common. And so it was a lot of, assistive technology, home mods, functional training, stuff like that. And I really enjoyed it. So I fell into it. I was actually considering leaving OT before that last role. And then that sort of saved me and then put me on the trajectory that I'm in now. So yeah, lucky I did that. And then I just went along with my interests, learning more about AT, home mods, all that sort of stuff. And just, I guess, a lot of it was self-taught in the NDIS space because that casual role didn't really provide any support. So that was fun.
That would have been very interesting.
Yeah, very interesting. Although probably common among a lot of companies in that space. So yeah, I did that. I guess I just kept working on my interests and my strengths and things like that.
How did you end up working for yourself?
So it started by having a conversation with someone that I worked with who was working full-time in the same place, same role I was doing. A bit older, a bit more experienced. And he was just talking to me about how he does some sort of out of hours private work for himself. And then I was like, well, I could probably do that. So I put myself out there. It was this all started, it was right at the beginning of COVID. And it was a time where there was a massive shortage of OTs.
Huge demand. It was a good time to jump.
It really was, because really all I did was sort of just list myself online, and then I had calls coming in pretty much straight away. So to be honest, it was an easy start for me, I feel.
Yeah, I think we see this a fair bit. I'm certainly seeing this at the moment. I ran a workshop the other day about how to add private clients to your practice, because so many businesses in the past sort of 5 to 8 years have just happened to open and happened to be chockers and get clients and get referrals. And now as we're having to be more intentional, then we're having to really come back to all those basics that we should have done a lot stronger at the starting point, but just didn't need to. So I know you've been looking to hire. You've got contractors working for you at the moment, and they're just doing a little bit of work, or just taking referrals when you've got it. What does that look like?
So there are 3 subcontractors at the moment. They all have full-time roles elsewhere, so it's sort of just out of hours stuff.
When you say out of hours, what does that mean? It means that they've done like the one-off observation-y thing, and then they're just doing the work in their own time, essentially.
So like they'll book in clients on, after they finish at their job or during the week. They might do the assessments and sessions on the weekends, and then some of them might have a sort of more of a flexible working arrangement where they'll do like longer hours Monday to Thursday, and they'll have a half day Friday, for example, and they'll fit in the sessions then. So
Yeah.
it's limited, but it honestly it has been a big help for me because it has helped manage referrals and my own sort of workload too. But
And
obviously not to the extent that a full timer would. So yeah.
yeah. What's your reason or purpose? Why do you want to grow? What do you want to get out of it?
Since I've started this, it's sort of become, my baby, I suppose.
Mm.
I guess a big project of mine. I've always been the type of person that's been motivated by results and progress, even in my personal life. So putting in the work, being consistent, and just seeing results. And in this case, it's growth and scaling the business. As well as that is I've started a family, so that's growing too. And I suppose I'm probably spending a bit more time in the company than what I would like to. So as I scale, I'm hoping to be a little bit less hands-on and have the business be able to sort of run or be able to run without me being there 24/7. And I guess that goes into things like if I want to go away for a few weeks, I don't have to worry. Things don't stop.
I think this is the dream of all clinicians that are growing, that, it'll just get to this point where I can step back. Now, Gerda Muller, it would be interesting for you to have a look at Gerda Muller's podcast. She has a really great one that is all about success in business and private practice. And she talks about in there a lot around a self-running business. And I think one of the challenges that we have when it's just us is like the dream is off the tools, money's coming in, I've done this hard work. You're a long way away from there. And I think that that's really important for us to think about because it impacts on the next hire, right? If you're taking on a new grads need significant amount of hands-on support. And it might take a really long time before they are self-sufficient, running effectively, all of those things. So it is really curious. And I know you've been trying to hire for a long time, haven't you? You've had job ads out and we've been trying. To be fair, you were in a highly populated area where everyone has job ads and there's, hundreds of job ads in the area that you're in. So it's really, really tricky to recruit. How did you get your subcontractors? How did you find them?
So subcontractors, the first two were people that I know. So I just reached out to them. They're actually friends of mine and they were interested and they jumped on board. The third one I happen to know as well from my studies, and I just bumped into her one day at an equipment store. We hadn't seen each other for a while. I put the idea forward to her and she agreed. Since then, we've had one more come on board, and that's through, I guess, other methods. So what I've been doing really is just calls, cold emails, just reaching out to people. And then I guess it's sort of a numbers game really, in that I don't respond and then one will and will be interested. So that's just through consistently trying to contact people.
Yeah, so
while
just working
also
like a
doing,
recruiter. You're just doing your own personal recruitment.
and then among other things like through LinkedIn, job ads, things like that. So, but
Yeah, it's just an incredibly tricky market at the moment. What are your thoughts around all the changes? Because you're working across two funding schemes that have significant changes coming ahead. Are you registered for either of them, or are you just sort of working within both the schemes? What does that look like?
working in both the schemes through support at home or home care packages, I'm just an associate provider. We work with quite a few different registered providers. And in the NDIS space, again, we're not registered. I guess I made the decision not to, just because up until this point, the work has been too much as is. So, and I haven't had too much trouble in terms of, plan managed and self-managed clients coming our way. So there hasn't been a need to register, but obviously things are changing, like you've said. So we're just keeping an eye on things. I have actually prepped the company in terms of like systems and documentation should, it come around that registration is necessary for everyone. So I guess we are ready. And, if we need to do it, we'll do it.
Yeah, great. So tell me about the recruiting. We've been looking, what have you been asking for or looking for in your ads? Which again, it's incredibly tricky because you're just out there. I don't know that you can really do a standout ad these days because everybody is doing standout ads. It's, thousands of things. Have you had any involvement with uni students or hosting placements or anything like that? Or have you just been trying to present as a practice and put it out there and try and find someone?
Presenting as a practice, definitely. The only reason why I haven't gone through the student pathway is because I feel like it would be hard to manage with my workload at the moment. So I haven't done that, as well as look, I know that there's ways around it, but I think that it's a bit more complicated when you're a mobile only company as well, in my opinion. I know it can work, but there's just extra considerations there. So, in terms of like what we've done, I think you asked, so, job ads, reaching out to people. We've tried paid ads. I've gone through various recruiters as well unsuccessfully. And yeah, it's really just, we've tried different things in terms of different types of ads, different types of wording, different platforms, different salaries and inclusions, other benefits.
Are you getting applicants or just nothing?
No, we haven't. We
Yeah.
haven't got many applicants, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
We've had a
Yeah.
couple show interest, but for the amount of ads and time and frequency of the postings,
Or for how much you've
very
been
minimal.
working, like you've put yourself out there significantly. We found the same, like in our practice, it got to a point back in the old days, I used to be able to put an ad out and people would apply. It was amazing, like, how it was meant to work. That hasn't happened for a very long time. But I think this is something it's important for our community to be aware of, because I talk to a lot of therapists who are like, I'll just hire. And you're like, cool, that's what everybody thinks. And it is not as easy as that. And, you've put the time and effort in. Tell me about the recruiters. Surely they at least got somebody in front of you?
I'm not sure if we discussed, but I did actually have someone that signs a contract now, which is a new grade. They have yet to start yet, but that was through a recruiter. So I guess what's happened in the past is we've engaged a recruiter and they just haven't been able to fill the spot. Various reasons, I think that they've underestimated how difficult it was going to be to place someone. And the second recruiter who ended up being successful, I guess we started the process about 9 months ago, I think, when we first started talking. And there's been a lot of sort of fall through. So with the first recruiter, there was one catch up or like a video interview that we did that didn't go anywhere, and then nothing after that. The second time there was a couple of interesting candidates that came through, but they sort of just ghosted when it came time to doing a phone catch up just to see if it'd be the right fit. And then we just had this last person come through who, I looked at his resume, it seemed good. We did a phone catch up, or video catch up, sorry, just an informal sort of casual conversation. We got along, did a more formal interview after that. Again, was happy with what I saw, and I offered him the job and he said yes, but I guess he's not due to start for another, I think, 5 weeks. So
yeah, wow.
I guess a lot could happen in that time frame, just because he's doing a move to
Yeah. I think recruiting is one of the most annoying parts of the work that we do, and such a time suck, right? Like, especially when you're carrying a full caseload and all the work that goes with it. And I just think, I talk to a lot of early career therapists. Like, I've talked to ones that go, I'm just going to interview everywhere. And you're like, you're wasting everybody's time. Do not go and interview at 10 places. Pick 3, do that. Like, it's really difficult and it's hard, the time and the investment. I've had therapists previously that I've onboarded, bought all the things, and then they haven't started. So bought the computers, bought the iPads, got a clinic space, like all of that, and circumstances just change. So it is such a tricky spot. So when you're thinking about, so just peeling back to what we talked about a little earlier, the intention for growth, one, it's from it for success measure. So that piece of like, yep, I've done this, I've mastered running this for myself, and now I want to build it. I think it'd be nice for you to think through that a bit more. Like, what would that look like? What would I want the team to look like? Not so much like I want to be off the tools and the business is just running, but what would that look like? Is it separate departments? Is it, just a team of 5 and they're all really efficient? Because this will be helpful in terms of who you're trying to target as well. And that also helps us to consider future planning with the funding changes and things like that. Once we're going, what does that mean? Because one of the things that we're starting to see, there's been a bit of a change under the Health Professionals and Support Services Award. This won't impact you directly just yet, but if you were to put somebody on in a middle tier position, so someone underneath you but above the new grad, then they're starting at like 105,000. And this can be tricky when you've got a little business and there's just not a lot of money sitting there to bring people on and just, do all the fun things. But it's a really important thing to consider as you're going, what do I want this to look like in 5 years? Because what we have all previously done is go to more of a pyramid sort of, you're at the top, you've got like middle management underneath you, and then you've got the people working on the ground. But with this health professional award change, you sort of need everyone to be clinicians. Like, you don't really want to have all these different tiers in there in such a small business. So just important to, I guess, consider as you're conceptualizing moving forward. The other bit that's tricky, as you bring people in, it just takes a lot of your time. So a new grad just requires so much of your time, and that can be tricky when you're the money generator. So really having to be very conscious about how you're going to upskill them and how you're going to support them without burning yourself out significantly as well.
And that's something that I'm trying to work through now and work out how that's going to work. But I guess I don't say I wouldn't say that I want to be completely off the tools. I like being on the ground. I like the OT stuff. I like the client facing stuff. So I don't think I'd ever completely pull back. But in terms of future sort of how the business would look, really it's just going to be obviously me as the person running things, but also on the ground and obviously managing the team. But I envision just a small team of OTs, and obviously admin support, things like that. And then there's probably going to need to be a sort of an OT that's more of a management sort of team leader position. So that's my vision moving forward. I guess the only thing I haven't decided is whether it would stay as a mobile company or if we go to a clinic based. I really like the mobile aspect of things and the flexibility, so I'd like to keep it that way. But if it doesn't work once that team is in place, then we'll have to revisit things.
Yeah, absolutely. It might be something just to think about now in terms of, especially with this person coming on, how you're going to have face-to-face time with them. So whether it is you might not need a clinic, but potentially we have a space that we're going to once a week where we can have face-to-face supervision and support. If they're doing home mods and bits and pieces like that, you can hands-on review what they're doing and have that sort of touch-base point. So that could be something to think about. It is a massive overhead having that clinic space, but I think a lot of this will come as we see price guide and things like that come out. Like there'll be other levers that make this make more sense. The tricky part with new grads is that they don't necessarily know any different. So they don't know what sort of support they need. And they could say, yes, I love this. I have many, many new grads that I've supported. Some of them thrive in this mobile style and others really need that touch point support all of the time. So really trying to think about, if we don't have the clinic space, how do I offer that? Like for the clinical work that you're doing, you definitely don't need a clinical space, but it'd be more for that team side of it.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, I have considered those shared sort of office spaces. That you're right, they do have a higher cost. So it is something that I definitely need to look into a bit more and think about more, because I definitely know that the way I structure my week at the moment is not going to work once the new grad starts. So I'm going to have to change things up.
Yeah. What are you thinking in terms of onboarding of the new grad? So are you doing 5 billable days, or what's the intensity of your clinical work look like at the moment?
Yeah, so I'm doing 5 days. In terms of, what do you mean by what do my billables look like at the moment?
What does your day-to-day responsibility look like? I think you might have said in your pre-information to me that you were doing a bit of 2 days was face-to-face, and then you had 3 days sort of more report writing and that back-end type stuff. What does that look like for you? And because you're doing pretty massive hours, but I'd imagine you're pretty busy most of the time.
Yeah, so look, I usually do a Monday to Friday. I usually start maybe about 7:30 in the morning and finish around 5, just depends. 2 of those days I like to put all my face-to-face appointments in, so they're full, and then that gives me 3 days at home. I can do, catch up on reports, follow-up tasks, admin, all that sort of stuff. And then on those at-home days, I usually allocate about an hour a day for business tasks and business admin and all that sort of stuff. So again, I know that's not going to work. So I'm thinking that once the new grad starts, it's going to have to be a bit more split evenly in terms of maybe 4 or 5 days a week out, 1 or 2 sessions, face-to-face sessions in the morning, and then, together with the new grad, that gives us, a bit of time after the sessions, and then the rest of the days admin reports, things like that. So it's probably going to be that way. I'm thinking I need to sort of review it a bit more, but yeah, that's what my week looks like at the moment. And I do know that I definitely need more business time, because 3 hours a week is starting to not be enough, especially since we're starting to have some more responsibility for subcontractor tasks and managing them and things like that. So
yeah, I wonder, because you do have a fair chunk of support at the moment. So you've got your VA. How many hours is your virtual assistant doing?
so they're full-time. So they're a massive help.
And what are they doing? Like, what sort of tasks and things are they doing for you?
So they are pretty much an all-rounder. So they manage the social media stuff, so the LinkedIn, Facebook, all those pages, and they post 3 times a week. They also do a blog post once a week for our website. They manage engagement on social media, and just really just the goal is to grow the reach and the followings on those pages. They also help with onboarding stuff. So in terms of client onboarding, putting details into the client management system, preparing service agreements, preparing initial assessment templates, all that sort of stuff. They do some accounts and finances, so they check off invoices once they've been paid. They also help with monitoring and following up on reviews, like if we submit a request for assistive technology via NDIS, they have the reference number, they check in to see, what the update is on that, what the status is on that. They also help with things like Google reviews, and they do also help with recruitment a bit as well. So they'll send out emails and make posts on Facebook pages and things like that for, subcontractors, full-time OTs, things like that.
Yeah, sounds like that's being used effectively. And then your partner's doing some things within the business as well.
Yeah, so the virtual admin can do anything basically doesn't involve getting on the phone. So my partner does roughly about 1.5 days a week. So she will schedule appointments, face-to-face appointments, and get on the phone. She'll do reconciling on Xero and other sort of admin or accounts or finance tasks as well.
And is she got more hours available, or is that sort of capacity for where you guys are sitting?
At the moment, it's capacity.
Just thinking about like a bit of what you were saying around some of those management tasks, and if you really do love the clinical work, sometimes it's just helpful to think your billable hourly rate is much higher than someone that you can bring in to do some of that, like supporting and getting those bits and pieces done from the contracting team. So just good to have a think about how we utilize everyone. I wonder whether there's a piece in that with your VA that you could have some sort of like an audity checklisty type thing that they're checking in with your contractors. Like if you set it up and you knew what it was that they needed to be doing, maybe that's something that you're outsourcing to someone who already sounds like they're pretty well across your team, but you're not losing hours to them. We're going to need to lose it to the new grad, definitely, but hopefully not forever and ever and ever. But those contractors should be pretty self-sufficient. And it just sounds like you've done a great job setting up that VA. So it sounds like they would definitely be able to, if you gave clear parameters as to what the check-in points were, that could potentially be managed better there.
Yeah. No, they're a gun for sure. They do a bit of that in that they will audit the clients that they've seen every sort of set period, just to make sure that, files are uploaded into the client management system, progress notes are done. I guess the invoicing for managing the invoices is sometimes done for my partner as well. Mm-hmm. I just sort of I check in with the referral sources and the subcontractor themselves just to make sure that everything's running smoothly, and I tend to do a bit of allocation of referrals as well, just because my wife is limited in her capacity to do it. So yeah, fair. But you're right, there's probably some stuff that can be delegated.
Yeah, it sounds like you've done some really good systemization of things, which makes all of this heaps easier. Tell me a bit about the allocation piece, because this probably needs to sit with you while you're building your new grad skills up anyway. So it's not something that probably needs to go too quickly, because you're going to have to heavily review everybody coming through and check whether they're there, what that looks like, how much support you want to give them. So that can probably stay with you for now. It sounds like you're very good at managing your caseload. So it doesn't sound like you've got long reports outstanding and things like that. It sounds like you're pretty efficient with those things. These are sometimes things that we forget we need to teach a new grad. So sometimes once we've become so efficient with the way that we do it, we forget that all those skills need to be transferred over to a new person in that space. So that's probably a big thing for you just to consider. How did you get? And if you go back and listen to a few of the other podcasts, you will hear that there are many therapists that are not efficient in the way that they do things, particularly with your type of caseload. So just keep that in the back of your mind as you're building up a new therapist, that these good organization skills that you've got are not an innate skill for every OT. Talk to me about how you were thinking about onboarding your new grads. So there's so many things we've sort of got to think through here. It sounds like you were planning on looking through and picking and allocating consistently. So going, yep, this is where they're at. Have you thought about like a competency framework or something like that where you can go, here are the different skills that you need. Let's make sure you've done this type of referral, this type of equipment. Like, have you thought anything about how to build their competency in the work that you guys do?
So I've actually created a 4 week onboarding plan, which initially was for a not a new grad because we were looking for someone with experience first, but I've adapted it to be, I guess, suitable for a new grad. Obviously, it hasn't been used before, so it's something that gonna have to monitor and review as I'm working through it with the new grad. But basically, it starts off sort of with a heavy amount of shadowing at the start. So there's going to be a lot of direct time spent with the new grad, which I think that they need. They just come out of uni, they've got minimal experience, so it's going to be a lot of shadowing and just, I guess, learning the ropes, and then progressively over the weeks starting to delegate some follow-up tasks and things like that. So at the start, it might be writing up the SOAP notes, doing a simple sort of home modification, scope of works or diagram, getting quotes or researching a suitable assistive technology item, just simple stuff. And then obviously for clients or participants that are not so complex, and then just gradually increasing the complexity or the difficulty in the tasks very slowly, and I guess that would be monitored and reviewed according to how they're going until it gets to a point where they're able to sort of do things from start to finish independently. So without going to look at the onboarding SOP myself now, I guess briefly it would look like the first maybe a week or two would be a heavy amount of shadowing, and then that would sort of reduce, but there would still be allocated supervision and check-in times throughout the week, and that might be through Teams or face to face, depending on what the schedule looks like.
I wonder if you could nearly do a bit of an audit of the referrals that you've got, say pick 6 of them, or even maybe potentially you could go into your wait list. Have you got a wait list? Have you got a decent amount of people sort of sitting there? Like, I wonder if you could go in and just sort of not prioritize them, but like triage them effectively. So actually go through and look at what you would deem your low complexity clients, and then develop your training pathways up around those types of referrals. So I think, have you ever hosted a student, like not in this business, but in your previous roles, have you ever been a supervisor?
I have, yes.
Yeah. So think hopefully they're going to be a little bit further along from where they were as a student, but they may not always be. So sometimes it's helpful to look at those referrals and go, actually, we're just going to work side by side until you complete this referral. So that might be an easier way to think about it. Then you can deem them competent in whatever the referral type was that had come through. So I wonder if that might be an easier way for you to think about it, because then you can be more intentional about your touch points with them. So I'm here for the information gathering appointment, and then at the end of the day, I'll check in and make sure you've worked on your scope of work. So I've given you the example. We've already talked through what to do. So you still do that shadowing, but then the next part is done with a lot more intent of, this is what I want you to get out of this. I'm giving you this client, we're doing it together, but I'm giving you this part of the responsibility. One of the things I think we've got to be really mindful of, and I think especially for good equipment, people who do good referrals for equipment, and people who do home mods, you guys are so smart, and you forget that not everyone knows how you think about things. And so when they do portions of the work, they may not build their clinical reasoning up as effectively as what you think. So I just think this, when I listen to Sarah and Nikki on the big pod, I'm like, guys, you're talking about this as if this is second nature. I know none of this. So I'm just mindful when we do portions of it, there are different students who would learn in different ways, and they might just go, cool, scope of works, but they don't always go, oh, so next time I did a scope of works, I'd have to take that into account, and he told me to do this, and boom, 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 boom. So just have a think about doing a task as a whole, and then what are the takeaways for those next steps.
It's okay. So are you meaning, so like, we're going through, I'm completing the assessment, after that we would review or go through the recommendation, then we talk about, okay, like, so this person has a left side lower limb weakness, for example, had trouble stepping over the shower base lip, had nothing to hold on to. That's why we're doing the grab rail. And
Yes,
that's
100%.
why we put it on the wall here, because that's reachable from outside of the shower.
Yep.
Yep. Okay. Yep.
Yep. So that verbalizing, and then as you're with them over the coming ones, to be like, well, why would you do that? Tell me what your thinking is around that. So you're demonstrating your clinical reasoning throughout initially, but then we're moving to where they're demonstrating it back to you once you can see it, because sometimes we skip that and we're only looking, I know in the PED space, we're just saying, well, what did you do? Not why did you do it? And that's where you see clinical competence developing. And that's what we want to start seeing to move. Now, it might be helpful. I know Nikki's in the process of developing her clinical competence framework. So she was just presenting on it at ATSA, and it was a very big document. She had like level 1 competencies, level 2 competencies, level 3 competencies. And it was something similar to what you might have come across when you were doing hospital work, or it was similar to what we had to do back in Enable time in New South Wales, where you weren't allowed to prescribe something until you'd done it 3 times and you'd had someone sign you off. And, there was a clear framework in terms of how you demonstrated the competency. But what she was talking about in that presentation was NDIS says we have to be competent in the work that we do. So as an employer, how do we demonstrate your competence? So that's probably a good thing to have a think about how you're documenting. In my practice, we used to have like a checklist of the different things. We'd say, yes, this is with support, or no, now you're independent. And so we had that documented clearly there to demonstrate as we were building those skills up, similar to when you hosted a student, but now we're doing it intentionally, because there's a difference. Like you were saying, when you bring on an experienced therapist, it's a short-term onboarding and then they're pretty much ready to go because you're just teaching them how you want things done. But with a new grad, you actually have to teach. You have to teach all of the things, all of the skills, all the clinical reasoning, all of that stuff. So how do we document that piece of it? So that might just be nice to think about as well.
Yeah, no, that's something I haven't considered before. That's a good point.
Yeah. Now, the other part of that then is thinking about the difference between training and supervision. So for some people, they do find it easier to push them through like a lot of the NDIS Verve trainings. Given that you're so chockers and busy, it might be worth having a look and seeing, is there some baseline things that I can get them to do so the information's there. Now, you also have time. If you really wanted to, you could quickly just make these little modules for yourself, so then you've got it for other people. But if not, you could put them through some of those things that already exist that's going to teach them. We can't assume anything for a new grad. We really have to go, have I given you all the information you need to know to do the work that I want you to do?
By that, do you mean, say, like how to structure a recommendation letter with documents and instructions on?
That's probably a bit further than what I'm thinking. That's probably a little bit higher. I would come back to NDIS. What does a plan mean? What's plan managed mean? What's self-managed mean? What's the stay-at-home funding? Like, we have to have that teaching of those concepts as well, because again, this is just so natural in our head. We just know it inside and out. But if you look at the questions that are on either of those Facebook pages, you've got the people like you and I who know how the system works. And then you've got the other people who are like, can I recommend this? Like, well, no, that's actually on the out list. So that just straight up isn't even an option. So we need to teach all of that knowledge first, then you're supervising them on it.
Oh, and giving the resources, things like the out list and what is reasonable and necessary and things like that.
So I think because you think like this already, you could probably pretty quickly and easily pull something together. And I'm really enjoying using Claude at the moment, where I can like brain dump all of this and be like, cool, make this as a little checklist for my team, or make this. I think you could probably do that really easily. A lot of other therapists don't have the time or the interest, or maybe they're just too busy to be able to do it. But I think if you weren't able to do that, I know a lot of us will push, Verve has that intro to NDIS, how to do your billable time, things like that. So remember, each of those is an hour of your time. So if it's cheaper for somebody else to run it, it's probably smarter to get those things done by a training module over you dedicating 20, 30, 40 hours of your own time to upskill in that area.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah, so it might just be worth going and having a squeeze through and looking, or even just writing your own and going, cool, do I feel comfortable to talk to each of these? Now, in my practice, we had many, many new grads, so I've tried lots of different things. One of the things we found had to be really careful about slow teaching. So being like, next week we'll do this and next week we'll do this, because they might not have mastered the thing from the week before. So that's why I find it's a little bit more easier to do it more situationally. So this is the client in front of us. Let's teach you everything you need to know with here. We've got a few of those things running in the back end, but I'm never not coming back to that. So you're learning that context of how NDIS works and how stay-at-home funding works. But now I'm going to teach you what that looks like straight into practice, so it makes sense straight away.
Yep. Okay.
Now, in terms of supporting your new grad, moving forward, be thinking ongoing weekly supervision. So you've sort of got two things again. Remember, we've got training and supervision. So it's still going to be a stack load of your time, which is tricky, but that's okay if we're more intentional with it. So think if I'm giving more specific things like, okay, we've both been with this client now, I want this done. Things that I would say that are really important is for you to say, and this should be done by this time, and it should take you this amount of time. Now, for new grads, it always takes a lot longer than you think. Obviously, it's going to take much longer than what you take, but you might say, I'd expect it to take longer, but in the future, we're going to work towards this taking about an hour. Let's track and see how long it takes you. So then you can start seeing. When I supervise new grads, I do a lot of what was easy and what was hard this week. So hopefully I can find out, oh yeah, that report took me 5 hours, but I only told you it took an hour. Hopefully I'm starting to hear that so then I can come back and go, oh, why? Why did that happen like that? Where when we're not asking those things or we're not giving the expectations around it, then often times just take a really long time. And especially for your type of work where time is money and time is really important. We can't just sit there. We need to be effective and efficient. So trying to teach that from the start.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm thinking of going back to what we said before, of doing the supervision weekly at the start at least, and then maybe going to a fortnightly as they become more independent, but as well as paying for external supervision from a company like Verve OT, and that can be a monthly thing. So at least they're getting something every week to fortnight.
You might find that that's a better option when they're a little bit further in. So maybe weekly with you in the short term, because what's tricky is because I do a fair bit of this, it's difficult for me to do part of your supervision and someone else do part of your supervision, because what if I tell you something different to how the clinical lead wants it done in the practice? So you might find it's sort of better to headspace. I'll have them weekly. When they're ready to go to fortnightly, that's when I would outsource them to the opposite fortnight, is when they see that other person, because we've already built their baseline skills. So you're not going to get as much somebody saying to do it differently to how you don't. For you want your team to work in the way you want them to work. In the future, once you're competent and confident in them, then absolutely we want them to grow and have different skill sets to you. But I like to call the difference between clinical and professional supervision. So professional is where I'm looking at you as a whole, as a profession, as a professional. So I'm not just looking at your clinical skills. When we go and outsource, they might take one tricky case to somebody. So I know Sarah does a lot of that. We've got this one home mods situation. Great, let's go deep dive into that. But that's not the same as that professional supervision. And that's what I think is tricky if we haven't had that exposure to that previously. Does that make sense?
Yeah. While they're still developing those foundational skills.
Where you and I would go, that's great. Like, let's go out to an external person. Oh my gosh, this is so amazing. When you're in that early space, we actually just need someone to tell me what am I meant to do and why am I meant to do it that way.
Okay. Yeah. No. That's something to think about, definitely.
Yeah. Now, other parts to think about if you're bringing them on would just be to think about how you schedule your week out. So yes, we said you might have that flexible time. You might even go one day is yours, one day is theirs, one day is yours, one day is theirs, potentially. So you've got 2 solid days to just get in and do your own work. You're somewhat available, but on the other 2 days, you're super available. So that might be something to think about. When you're face to face, they are just in with you all the time, asking all the questions, getting all of that guidance. I don't know, one way you could think about it is potentially for a 2-week block, you don't do any of your own clinical work. You're just with them and onboarding them. So you're 100% there. You're taking them through all the systems. You drop your clients right down and you just sort of do dribs and drabs as you can. That might be a nice way to think about just getting them onboarded really effectively. That way they're not out by themselves within that first 2 weeks and going, I don't even know what to do. I don't know how to start that. I don't know how to remember. These guys haven't even done professional emailing. They haven't done professional phone calls, like so much of that stuff. But if you did that intentional 2-week block, you might be able to cover that pretty easily as well.
Yeah, that actually sounds like it might be a good idea now that you say it. And that'll make it less stressful for me too, I believe. Because I'm not 100%. Thinking like I've got to get this done, I've got to get done. It's just the time's allocated.
And it's pretty, we've got enough time now that you could do that. You could also save a little buffer for yourself so that you can push hard for this next 5 weeks. So you've got that buffer sitting there and then you're not going, oh my gosh, I've got to catch up, or, oh, there's no money coming in. Great. I pre-planned for this. So I have this lower 2 weeks to get to there.
Okay. Yeah, it's a good idea.
What about other things? So emails, I've used to run a getting set up in professional practice training for new grads. So I've worked with hundreds of new grads. New grads are a really interesting space. You will have some that just totally fly. others who need a fair chunk of support, and others who need a lot of support but maybe don't know that they need it. So I think it's important to have a think about how are you going to set yourself up that you're available enough, but not so much that it wipes you out completely as well. So once we get past that 2 weeks, we might go, great, once a week, I'm intentionally with you floating for the whole day. So we do that joint session, I set you up, whatever, as you vibe it out over the week, you go, great, you're not needing me as much. I drop you off and I go home, but you can still call me. This is my flexi day. Could be the day that you do your business work, so it's not so disruptive to your clinical stuff. So something to think about there. But then you've got your intentional supervision as well. So when I used to do my supervision for my new grads in that first 6-month period, I got to the point where I was actually just doing caseload review. So it was more specific, like, where's the client? What are you doing? Why are you doing? Where are we going to? And what can be helpful, I think you would do this pretty well anyway, but what can be helpful is moving more to, here's what I would do for a big chunk of the time, until you can start seeing their own clinical reasoning start to develop. You're explicitly saying, here's this, like you said, here's this person, they've got this going on. I'm thinking X, Y, and Z. Next, I'm going to do this. Then I would do this. I think it would take this length of time. You know how you said that then it goes onto that little list, and then we know we'll follow up with NDIS at that point. You're teaching all of those things. And then when you're checking in, you're seeing if they're following that whole process with your client. What tends to happen in supervision is they tend to bring problems to you, and we miss the context of why it's a problem. So they're like, oh, I don't know what to script. You're like, oh, well, hang on, unpack all of this. Let's go back. What's the disability? What's the progression? Why are we thinking this? What are we looking at? So you want to just make sure you've got time for that. Then in supervision, you're setting it up effectively to build reflection, but not strongly to start with. So we can be more directive to start with, and then we move to a reflective model of supervision over the time as you see that skill increasing. Yeah. It's an interesting time bringing on new grads. It's a stack of work. It can be amazing. All of my team were new grads. I only had one experienced therapist come and join us. So all of my team were new grads. It's a lot of work, but then they know, and especially if you're good at what you do, then they are taught really, really well. But you've just got to be careful that you don't accidentally wipe yourself out in the same period of time too.
Yeah. It's very much uncharted waters to me. So I know it's going to be hard. I don't really know what to expect. It's the next thing that you've given me a lot of things to think about, which I didn't think about previously.
I think that you'll be so good at this though, because you're so systematic in the way you've thought about everything that you've been doing. Now that you know what you want to think about, you can easily just start popping these things down, making processes, like all of those things. You're still well ahead of many, many, many other practices. Like think about all those big businesses that just bring new grads in and then they go and go. And we go, absolutely not. Definitely you can't just go. You need training and support. And this is what's incredibly frustrating when we think back to why you can't recruit. It is annoying that practices that are going to put the time and energy into their team can't recruit, even though you are doing the right things for everybody. So, but that's just a reflection of the market at the moment. And unfortunately, just a really, really common story. And there is no magical answer. I can't give you any magical thing there. It just sucks. It's so hard trying to hire. But I do think that now, as you get this one person, just coming and thinking about that social media profile and think about this is a great place to work. So let's talk about how great it is. Let's show how we go and get coffee. Let's show how we're together. So they talk about that social proof for the business, but now we're a social proof for employees as well.
That's something that I knew that the company needed on the social media side of things, but I haven't been good at delivering that or showing that, and I haven't put enough effort into that side of things. But maybe it's been a bit more difficult to show just because I haven't had the OT.
I was going to say, what are you showing? Look how fun I am. Oh, it's my birthday. I'm taking the day off. So I think that's a really fair piece. Like you just have not been able to do that. But that's just something now, because you have such solid marketing happening anyway, just add that in as a second level to it of we're a great team. This is a great place to work. Like if your intention is to grow, we're going to demonstrate why it is that you want to work here and how great it is and how much support we offer and all of those additional things.
Oh, that makes sense.
Excellent. Well, that brings us to the end of today's conversation. So what we normally do at the end of these conversations is a little bit of a note to self. So if you go back and maybe, what would you say to yourself when you came full-time into your own business? What would be kind words, guiding words, anything that you might say to yourself back when you started in 2020? Was it 2022, 2023?
Went out on my own completely 2023. Are you asking what me say to myself, me back then? Buckle up. I think that it's something that I've struggled with along the way is a bit of imposter syndrome and not believing that first hire and having a full-time OT come on board has been a really daunting thing for me. It seems like a massive hurdle to overcome, not just in the hiring aspect, just in my ability to do it and to manage it. And of course, I haven't done it yet, but I'm a lot more confident and feeling really good about it. So I guess I would say that to myself back then, that I need to believe in myself more and that I can do it.
You can. And we'll see how it goes. But it sounds like you're putting lots of great thought into it. And isn't it funny? Like, you spend all this time trying to hire, and then when it happens, you're like, oh God, now we've actually got to like do this next thing. But it will become a lot easier, especially like setting up a new grad program, getting that sorted. Your next hire is going to be 1,000 times easier than that. So I think some key takeaways, really coming back and just having a bit of a think about, what do I want this business to look like as I grow it, so that we're more intentional about who we're trying to get and why we're going to get them, because that might help us think about who we get to help us as we're trying to get more staffing as well. So thank you so much for joining us today, Chris.
Thanks for having me.
The OT Coaching Confidential podcast exists to support occupational therapists and allied health professionals to think clearly, feel less alone, and take meaningful steps forward in their work. If this conversation has resonated with you, take a moment to reflect on what stood out. What were your key takeaways? What might you apply in your own personal or professional practice? If you'd like to keep the conversation going, head on over to www.theotcoach.au. You'll find free resources, workshops, trainings, and practical tools to support you wherever you are in your career. And if you're interested in joining the OT Coach Academy, we currently have the Pediatric Hub for Pediatric OTs, the Sole Trader Hub for Sole Traders, and the Business Hub for business owners with a team. Please note that the information shared in this podcast is general in nature and is not intended to replace individualized professional advice. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode. The OT Coach, where therapists come to grow.